This video is about the best states for registered nurses here in the US, and I'm using data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Nurses Journal. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Manasseh and I'm a registered nurse here in the US. So the US is this wonderfully diverse country with 50 independent states, which are very different in a lot of ways. From huge states like California, which has an economy of about $3.2 trillion, which in context is the same size as the economy of Africa with its 54 countries put together, down to smaller states like Maine, which has an economy of about $80 billion, which is the same size as the economy of Ghana, my home country. Now, what this means in simple terms is that there will be more money for nurses in California than there will be for nurses in a smaller state like Ohio or Maine. But this does not mean that nurses in higher paying states have a better standard of living than nurses living in lower paying states. As a matter of fact, some states that pay registered nurses the highest are one of the worst states for registered nurses to work when you adjust it for cost of living and other things. And this is why when you do a linear tabulation of all the states and the amounts of or salaries they pay registered nurses and use that singular metric as a standard to judge which state is best for registered nurses to thrive, you'll be making a huge error. It is wrong, because I think that a lot more things have to be factored in than just salary. And so in deciding which states are best for registered nurses here in the US, I focus on things like the annual registered nurse salary, the cost of living index, the nursing workforce diversity, the average home prices, and the projected employment growth. And I use this to arrive at an overall weighted score, which gives you an idea of which states afford registered nurses the best opportunity to thrive here in the US. Fifth on the list is Arizona. Arizona is this beautiful state also known as the Grand Canyon, and Arizona has become a wonderful state for people who are looking for a quiet state where they will retire. And so there's a lot of population growth in Arizona due to a lot of baby boomers who are retired moving to Arizona and settling in. And like I said in my recent video about this country, Australia, when people are living longer, then there is an increasing demand for carers, which is why Arizona is having such a high demand for registered nurses. The annual salary for registered nurses in Arizona is $80,380 per annum, with a cost of living index of 101.3 and a projected employment growth of 35%, because a lot of people are moving there to retire, and the population of aging people who are looking for care keeps increasing. The nursing workforce diversity index for Arizona is 73.3%, and the average home price in Arizona is $435,000. So the fourth country is Texas. Texas is one of those interesting states for registered nurses, and it is such a huge state with an economy of well over $2 trillion. I mean, if Texas was an independent state, it would be the 8th largest country in the world. So just have that in mind, which is why it is number 4 on the top 5 states for registered nurses here in the US. Registered nurses in Texas are paid a whopping $76,800 per annum, with a cost of living index score of 92. So comparatively, it is cheaper to live in Texas than a state like Arizona. The projected employment growth for nursing in Texas is 16.8%, and the nursing workforce diversity in Texas is 98.1%. Now just keep in mind that Texas is a border state. It shares borders with Mexico, and there are a lot of immigrants and divergent nationalities living in Texas. The average home price in Texas is $348,000, which is one of the interesting things about the state of Texas. I mean, when I first moved to the US, the community liaison who took me around came from Texas, and she told me that the nurses who moved from other countries to the US and settled in the state of Texas just about a year ago, most of them have been able to purchase houses. And the reason is because the down payment for a home in Texas is just about $40,000, which is really low when you compare to other states in the top five states to work in the US. And it makes it really easy for nurses to raise that amount of money and buy their homes in Texas. And she's not talking about small size homes, she's talking about magnificent, huge, wonderful standard homes for nurses in the US. And it is just amazing to live in the state of Texas. Now, state number 3 in the top 5 states for registered nurses here in the US is New York. And New York, as you know, is the capital of the US, and it is where the action is, from the excitement of the Big Apple to wonderful and breathtaking landscapes. New York is a very beautiful state for registered nurses. The salary for registered nurses in New York is $89,760 per annum. The cost of living index is 146.6, which is really high. I mean, cost of living in the capital of the US is obviously going to be really high. So when you compare it to a state like Texas, which is 92, it is really high. The projected employment growth is 24.6%. So there's so much room for nurses who want to move to New York and work because there's so much demand for nurses there. Now, the nursing workforce diversity index in New York is 79.9%, and the average home price in New York is $490,000, which is not too high. Now, the overall weighted score for New York is 92, which makes it a wonderful place for nurses to work and thrive. The second best state for registered nurses to work here in the US is the state of Washington, which is where I'm privileged to live and work. I think it's the best state in the US actually, but this is what the data says. It is the second best state. Now, Washington shares border with Canada in the north. It's a very rainy state. It is clean, the people are friendly, staffing ratios is top notch. It's just an overall great state to work, believe me. Now, the average annual salary for registered nurses in the state of Washington is $91,310, even though I don't earn that. The cost of living index for Washington is 113, which is lower than New York. Now, the overall perception is that standard of living is quite high and things are really expensive for nurses to buy or to purchase here in the state of Washington, because a lot of the big tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, T-Mobile, Expedia, a lot of them head office is located in the state of Washington, and you know that tech workers have this unbelievably high purchasing power, and so home prices are really expensive in the state of Washington. The projected employment growth in the state of Washington is 20.5%. The Nursing Workforce Diversity Index, Washington state scores 74.5%, so there's not much diversity racially here. And the average home prices in the state of Washington is $602,000, guys. And that's one of the challenges for registered nurses. So if you need to live in the state of Washington, your best bet as buying a home will be in one of those states that is out of the centers or out of the place where the action is, because those houses are really expensive and you struggle to buy those homes. And that means that if you need about 20% as down payment for a home in the state of Washington, you are expecting to cough up well over $100,000 as a down payment for a home in Washington. And what this means is that somebody living in the state which may not be paying as much as Washington has the chance to buy their homes quicker and go on to buy multiple homes before a nurse in the state of Washington is able to afford a home, because home prices are really expensive in such states. And this brings us to the best state for registered nurses to work here in the US. According to the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Nurses Journal, California. The average annual salary for registered nurses in California is a whopping $120,560. And if you watch any of the videos of Jason on the channel Nurses to Riches, he talks a lot about how California is a wonderful place for nurses to work. And he specifically talks about Northern California and Sacramento or the Bay Area and so on, and a lot of those other cities and towns in the state of California, and how it is a very well-paying state for registered nurses. And the numbers there do agree with what he's saying. On the cost of living index, California is 142, up there with New York. The projected employment growth is 16.5%. The Nursing Workforce Diversity Index, California is 98.5. The average or median home price in California is $787,000. So just keep that in mind, that you may be earning $120,000, but your average home price in California is 2 times as compared to someone in, say, Texas or Arizona, which is why it's quite difficult for people to afford homes in California, and the number of homeless people in California just keeps increasing by the day, because it is so difficult to afford the down payment to buy a home in California for a lot of people. But I think registered nurses are able to raise the money to purchase homes in California. I know some people will be interested in knowing the top 10 states to work here in the US, and so this is a list of the top 10 states with their annual salaries that they pay, and you can take time to have a look at them if you are making a decision to move to the US or which particular state you want to migrate to. This brings me to the end of the video, and I hope this video has been of value to you. If so, like the video and leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.